كتاب الله دستوري كتاب الله دستوري وخير الخلق أسوتنا
بسنته انجلى نوري لهدي الحق أرشدنا
كتاب الله دستوري وخير الخلق أسوتنا.
The discussion can only be meaningful if we listen to each other.
Yeah, definitely.
So I gave her the opportunity to express herself, to make a point, which she did in relation to my question.
Yeah.
And then I asked for a clarification. I didn't take the amount of time that she took to explain. I just did it in less than 30 seconds saying, okay, you said this, where did you get it from? The reason being, this is not the reason that we know of. Why? Okay? So our Prophet ﷺ explained in the hadith, this is what transmitted in a mass transmission, which is called mutawatir, which is absolutely conviction comes from there, mass transmission. That there are communities, there are people within the Prophet's time, they're weak, they who cannot read and write, they're old. So reasons like this are given, who are incapable for some reasons, right? They cannot do that, not because they cannot remember the recitation. That wasn't what I read from all of these things.
But it's similar though, isn't it?
No, not similar. When someone, excuse me.
I mean, I only know from what she's come and just said. I've studied it myself.
I'll come back to your question, but what I'm saying is this. Excuse me.
Oh, because what you were saying, I think you're saying that there's two different versions of the original.
No, I'm not saying that at all. So I'll clarify.
Sorry, yeah.
Hay fever.
Yeah.
I know, I can tell.
Excuse me, please. Now, you would expect someone
Put it that way.
on their iPad with a PowerPoint presentation with the two differences would have at least understood the basics before going into the details, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a basic question. Why are there differences in these readings?
Are you using the example that she used? That we carry and mate to
No.
carry?
She picked up an example that we came into discussion.
Okay,
I've
yeah.
used that example. Okay,
Yeah,
I could have used any example that she provided or not
Okay,
provided.
right, yeah.
I simply asked, what was the reason given by the Prophet that he requested from Angel Gabriel to get Allah to reveal in 7 ahruf. Ahruf is a mode, you can call it, of recitation because of these weaknesses and inability of certain people. Not being able to remember, I don't think is one of them. I may be mistaken, I don't remember everything, but I don't think this was one of the case. Okay? So I can further check about I'm pretty certain it wasn't the case. So when someone gives you an explanation of a matter like this, which is the very core of this discussion, and gets it incorrect, it gives you the impression that they have no credibility to even discuss this subject on this issue. It's just like slogans, empty slogans, distributed. I give you a PowerPoint, you just say to the people, that's it. Not real substance. So now, your question is, you thought that there's only one Quran, there's no differences between letters and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the interpretation that I've always been
The
given.
Quran has come through the companions of the Prophet, so from the Prophet to us, and with readings like this. Okay, we have these authentic readings. There are slight differences that you have already noticed. Each of these reading that has been transmitted to us, they are preserved even to the letter and the dots and the sounds. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So if you were to read the readings of An-Nafi', Warsh An-Nafi' or Qalun An-Nafi', so take Warsh. It's a famous reading in Morocco, or take the reading of Hafs, which is famous most of the part of the world. So the Hafs reading, if I were to say, how is it preserved? I would say preserved to the dots. That's how we know the preservation. How is the Warsh preserved? Like to the dots. This is the amount of meticulous preservation of each of the readings.
I understand the preserve part, but I'm saying the interpretation part is where I'm just getting a little bit confused.
Not interpretation.
Well, I mean, like, if there is like two ways of putting...
Not two ways. There are how many... What were the differences, okay? We know the differences were...
Let's just use that example, because that's the only example I know, because that is how
So this is a grammatical This is a grammatical form.
One second, can I just ask you the question? She used an example of one part of the book saying we carry, and another part saying we have to carry. Now, I just want to know if that's true or false.
I personally don't know the reading because I am not memorizing all of them. Suppose this was the case, right?
Yeah.
So we have an example here of a grammatical inflection or grammatical shift, one active and one passive, something like this. We know our differences. There are differences of even the word order. Sometimes it's taqdeem and takhir, which is, so if you have a word, say Ghafur Rahim, Ghafur and Rahim. I'm making this up, right? Say, to give you an example, you can have Rahim and Ghafur, one preceding the other. You see how the word order can be different? Okay, so even though two words are the same. So these kind of, because what we had was Arab tribes who had their own linguistic nuances.
Okay, but then you still have one, because you've got the original one that was the one that you spoke of before. You know, the original, I think it was written on like
I'm talking about
and that stuff. You know, the preserved stuff.
What was written already.
Right,
so every reading that we have today, they have to go in line with this mushaf, the mushaf that was agreed upon by the Muslim community.
Right.
Yeah?
So if it's slightly different, then that one's wrong.
No, listen.
Sorry.
What every reading that is authentic to us, they have to be in line with this mushaf or the copy that Uthman compiled and distributed. If it doesn't agree with it, it's not acceptable to us.
Yeah, no, I'm not
so
talking about the disagreeing part.
that means I'm talking about the agreeing or disagreeing, any part.
Yeah, any part.
Anything that she brings, every example she brings, they will be in line with the script of this codex, if you want to call it, or the bound book, mushaf. Okay? If it's not, then it's not an authentic reading.
So is the Quran like a component of books into one?
The Quran was, you see, that's what we need to tell you a bit more about the history. But because it's something perhaps you haven't heard.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Very briefly, the Prophet allowed Muslims to recite in all these different forms. Sabat ahruf, 7 different forms.
When you mean by different forms, different language forms?
No. The forms comprises of the examples I've given you, 2 already. One could be the word order differences.
Okay,
one could be the grammatical inflection, whether it's...
Same thing, but the other way around.
Yeah. So, you've already found 2.
Then which one's right? Did you get what I mean?
If it comes from the Prophet, both of them are right. So that's why I'm saying, all the 10 readings, someone's smoking hashish or something, right? You can smell it. If the reading is from the Prophet, authentically transmitted, it's Quran. No doubt whatsoever. Every Muslim will accept it, and they do. So, why the difference arose is because the Prophet allowed or gave them this provision and the flexibility of some people, and I mentioned about the linguistic nuances of certain tribes. Arabs, they had several tribes within them. Each tribe had the linguistic nuances, meaning some of them would not have a particular word in their vocabulary. They can't use it, they can't utter it, they're not accustomed to it, for example. So if that particular word was revealed in a Quranic ayah or Quranic sentence, and it was done in another dialect, for them, what is that? So the Prophet would allow even synonyms within the dialect.
Right.
But again, from Allah, this is revelation, right? So for example, suf and ahil means wool. Suf al-manfush or ahil al-manfush, okay? To give you an example, so some of the tribes would not be able to pronounce it, use it, that's not part of their vocabulary. Okay, what are you talking about? But they would other synonym acceptable. So even these differences were allowed so that people can understand the message of the Quran. Again, this is from revelation, not someone making it up by themselves. If it's a revelation, we accept it. This is the only book that you can find that as far as I know, on planet Earth, that Allah has given within this flexibility to make the people understand the Quran.
Can I ask you a question? I've always thought though, why didn't the Quran be preserved in its original way?
That is the original way.
Hold on one second. Which was to recite it. I mean, like, to then write it down, it then leaves it open for interpretation, depending on how a person reads.
Briefly then, how the Quran was compiled, right?
But just to go back to my original point though, why did it have to get written down? Why couldn't we just continue to have been recited?
It is continuously being recited.
No, but it's been written down.
But it's also being recited.
No, but I understand that, but I'm saying...
It's a double method of preservation. It's written down also so that when you recite something and when you want to transcribe it down for help and ease of memorization, because not everyone memorizes, even though many people do.
Yeah.
But some people want to memorize by looking at it, reading it. Yeah. So when you start writing it, how are you going to write something when it's recited with sounds? Sounds with elongation, sounds with intonations. Technical terms. Like, let me give you an example. فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالْخُنَّسِ. Now, you write it down and let him write it down, let him write it down. You'll find you've written it down differently. And if I say, read it back to me. If I say, not you, because you've heard it, right? 3 other people, can you read it back to me? Do you think they will read it back to me exactly the way I recited?
I don't think so.
Exactly. Because the transcription does not account for the elongation of the sound that I made, the nunation. Khunnas. You will not even get that. How much? 2 seconds, 1 second? It will be very difficult. So what they did, they transcribed it, and with each copy, it was taught by a Quran reader, a qari. They will have to learn from this, but at least they know this is how to write it. And this is how you should recite it. Later on, as the script developed, as the language of writing developed, they started vowelizing and putting all these things. Now you can have the Mus'haf, the Quran, with color codings saying you, if it's this color, you make it 4 seconds long. If it's this green color, you make ghunna. Yeah? So this is called Tajweed Quran. So things like this are being facilitated now, and it's been constantly developed. So what we are saying is the Quran is an oral recital, for sure, but it has also been written down for a reason. Okay, and so one of the reasons I've given you exactly. So that when you want to read from it, then there are not several different readings. We know precisely this is what happened before. When there was no uniform acceptance of how to write it, the companions were the recipients of the Quran. Yeah, they were writing it as much as they are able to from their understanding of writing.
Would this have been God's word to write it down?
Yeah. The Quran says Allah has taught us the pen by the pen. The very first few revelation was, He taught by pen. The first few 5 or 4 ayat that was revealed was read in the name of the Lord who created, and then within this is this. He taught you by the pen. So the importance of writing is already very paramount in the Quran. In fact, the Quran says even if you're doing a transaction between 2 parties, even they be little or big, write it down, get it witnessed. So writing is a paramount place in Islam.
Also another meaning. Qalam here in this ayah could also mean at-taqlim. Taqlim means to analyze, because God revealed this book and He revealed this message for us to analyze everything, to know everything. This is how mankind understands, by analyzing. The word qalam here can also mean qalam and also can mean taqlim, means to analyze everything, to analyze this camera, to know it's a camera, it has a color, it has black, it has lenses.
Yes, but you're just giving an additional meaning, but the apparent meaning is the qalam, the pen. Okay, you can have several other additional meaning, no problem. We know the Quran even talks about how the Quran was written down, iktatabaha, and he recites it, in the morning and the evening. They used to accuse the Prophet. The Quran says, okay, he gets it written down and it being recited in the morning and the evening. So even the Quran that is being written down. So when the people were writing down, they were writing down within the best of their ability of the script that they're familiar with. There are only a few people who could read and write at that time. The Arabs were not a literate nation. Only few people who could read and write. So those who could read and write, they could write. Again, there will be differences between how they're writing it. And what's stopping them also from writing down the exegesis or the commentaries that they've heard, what it means. And we now have evidence from documentary evidence from the Quranic manuscripts, which has been reused, so we can see the underwriting, okay? That has been washed away because that's no longer relevant. People have even earlier than they rewrote again the Quran. So the underwriting, you can see people are saying, okay, in this surah, don't say Bismillah, and they carry on. Not in the footnote, within the same text. But that sentence is not part of the Quran, but they've added it there for their own interpretation. Imagine that that was copied, and it was copied and given to someone. They might think this is part of the Quran, because it's not embedded in a footnote on the side or a margin, but embedded within the text.
But where's the original scriptures?
So what happened is this: once all of these were being recited, so on, Muslims were at one point in the Battle of Armenia. At one point, when Islam spread, new Muslims are coming to the religion, and they're hearing this recitation recited in several of these forms, and they were saying, "My recitation is better than yours. Not that yours is not Quran, mine is not Quran, but mine is better than yours." And they would start quarreling, and that didn't seem right to one of the governors. He went.
So there could even be a change in the recitement when you're reciting it, because they're both reciting the same thing, but one saying that he thinks that his recitement is better than...
Did I give you two examples already?
Yeah.
But now they were saying, Hamalna, the example, if I'm assuming this is correct, or Humilna, he will say, no, mine is better. So the quarreling only happened because of these new Muslims who have now come to Islam without the proper etiquette of knowing that this is, you shouldn't do that. Both of them is from the Quranic recital.
But which one do they recite? I know they're both, and they're both legit, but then which one? Recite
whichever is better for you, whichever is easier for you, whichever you want to recite, whichever you wish, whichever you wish. So then the need arose at that time. This was the second crisis. There was another crisis before, when it was compiled first. This is the second compilation so they said, no, we're going to now write and unite the Muslim under one mushaf, one reading. So mushafs were written in such a way to accommodate all these readings as much as possible. So they left deliberately even the diacritical marks to distinguish between consonants. So this humilna and hamalna, even though they're the same consonants, without the vowelization, you can read from the same script in both ways. Okay? If they applied the vowels, then of course you can't. You can only read in one way. But the original compilation by Uthman, in his compilation, was done in such a way that you can read in both ways. Sometimes there was a reading, like if I said, for example, I don't know, an example of a one preceding another word. For example, suppose a word was, the word order differences. Of course you can't have it under one particular script. There has to be two different scripts, right? So we know examples like this were wassa and awsa. Yeah? Wassa and awsa. There's a sound, there's an alif, hamza in there. Because this was an acceptable reading taught by the Prophet, so how do you accommodate that in the same book? Copy. You can't. So what he did, Uthman, he copied wa'awsa in one mushaf and sent to the people around the regions where they were reading this reading, the familiar. And the other reading to where? To Shah, say to Basra, to Shah, to the places now. If I say Sham, that would be like Iraq, and then this region to Mecca and to Kufa, places like this. So we know, because we now have manuscripts to differentiate, yes, there are manuscripts from these different regions with this. We can clearly see manuscripts in, say, in the British Library is one of them. That manuscripts, we're comparing with a Paris manuscript or manuscript in Sana'a. We can clearly see, I have examples like this, right?
Hopefully you can accept that.
Yeah, so the point is, these differences were well established from the very beginning. These differences are acceptable because it's all part of Quran and it isn't transmitted meticulously to us.
I understand what you're saying, like, like it could be slightly changed, but it both means the same thing. Yeah?
So the difference is
that if you were to self-confess that, then it would be okay. But I mean, if you're saying that it's 100% accurate and there is no changes whatsoever, so for example, the original, you're saying like, I'm going to change the word so that better may he understand it. But even though it means the same thing, I'm going to change it so that he understands it. But the original script, what did it say? Was it like his version, or was it his version? When you say
original script, remember, there is no original script. The Quran was revealed in this.
The original
the recital, when it was recital, so sometime, for example, say it was revealed in, not say, of course, in 7 ahruf. Okay?
Yeah.
So if I,
Which is the first one?
So it's not what first one and second one. The Prophet taught different companions different ahruf. For example, which she alluded to earlier on, Surah Al-Furqan, chapter number 25 of the Quran. Okay? One of the companions was reciting in his prayer. Another companion, the one who was reciting was Hisham bin Hakim. The other companion that came was Umar bin al-Khattab. He came and he heard this recital. He immediately recognized that this was Surah number 25, Surah Furqan of the Quran. But he heard him reciting not the way that he's learned. So he felt like stopping him. But he said, okay, I'm going to wait till he finishes prayer, and then ask him, who taught you this chapter? This is the Prophet. So he said, no, the Prophet taught me like differently. So there was a dispute between them. He said, okay, let's go to the Prophet and find out. So they went both to the Prophet, and the Prophet then said, okay, Hisham, you recite. He recited, and the Prophet said, this is how it was revealed. It's to Umar. You recite. Umar recited the way that he learned from the Prophet. He says, this is how it was revealed. So now you have the Prophet endorsing both of these recitation. When this recitation had slight differences, recognizable differences. So hamalna and humilna is a recognizable difference, right? Okay. So the point to notice this, the differences that was allowed for flexibility of the people to come to know the Quran and understand the Quran and know the meaning of it, they do not contradict the meaning at all. Never contradict, but they're always complementary. Complementary. So an example which is used from the very first chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha, Maliki and Maliki. Did you notice the difference?
Yeah.
Maliki and one is Maliki.
Yes.
But they have difference of meanings. But look at the differences of meaning. One of them means king. Other one means the owner.
Okay.
Yeah? So are they contradictory in meaning? Because if you're the owner, king is the owner of his lands, his dominion. He's also, so they are complementary meaning by themselves.
I agree with you there, but at the same time though, depending on who's reading a king and an owner, they can see it in two different ways.
Yeah,
because one can see a king as a ruler.
But the contextual meaning does not change. Still, it says Maliki Yawmiddin, God is the Malik or Malik of the Day of Judgment. Now, what does it mean? That he is the king of the Day of Judgment? Okay. He's the owner of the Day of Judgment? What differences of understanding have we got from there?
No, but what I'm saying to you is that the king,
go on, what's the big difference?
The king and the owner.
You don't know what I'm talking about.
The king and the owner both can have similarities, I agree. But they can both be different as well.
No, from this example, if
you
we
can
say
have a king and an owner.
if we say God is the owner of the Day of Judgment, then we know that the Day of Judgment belongs to God. He's the one who's going to judge. If we say God is the king of the Day of Judgment, there's no other one else. There's none else. Then he is the one who's doing the judgment.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but then which one? So then the people that interpret it as the owner, they are reading it incorrectly.
No. The meaning which is trying.
No, but I'm saying that they're both different. Owner and king are different.
I am saying.
In English, you're finding the difference,
yeah?
Of king and owner. A person who understands Arabic here has no issue whatsoever. I understand what you're saying. In English, a king and an owner to you is a massive difference. But English lacks.
And in the Arabic, how we just pronounce it, there's not two words. One goes Maliki,
yes,
I think,
and the other
one is Maliki.
Yes, I understand. But the person who's listening to that in Arabic, they have no issue with the understanding of that word. We in English might have an issue.
In Arabic, though, if you only how do you differentiate?
No, you would say Maliki, innit? If you use the thingy and the king is Maliki. So there has to be a difference.
Yeah, but we're talking about the contextual meaning. So if God is the king of the Day of Judgment and the owner of the Day of Judgment, what is it telling us ultimately?
Was there any property back then? Did anybody have private property?
When somebody says, this is again another miraculous aspect of the Quran, when God is described as the king of the Day of Judgment, the Arabs had no concept of being owner or a king of any time periods. You can't own time. Look at it. You can't be the owner of time. I don't own time. So when God is the owner of time or the king of time, the time is under his control. And we're talking about not just ordinary time, the time, the yawm, which is the day of judgment. So the meaning, even though there are, you can see the slight, meaning differences, nuances, but the message is understood. And we have both of them. So our reading has come, not just one reading, whatever the text has accommodated, we've got all of them. So if you're only familiar with one, you might have one sense, but you understand the meaning. If you know all of this 10 qira'ah, then you also don't know the meaning, but perhaps you know the complementary meaning to it. Yeah. Okay? So it's complementary.
But that's what I'm saying. If I'm learning to be a Muslim, for example,
yeah,
and I read the part where it's owner, I haven't read it as it being a king, I've read it as owner. But then I speak to another brother now, me and him are talking, and he says it, but he says it as king. Right now we're going to come to a confusion, because I'm thinking it as an owner, he's thinking as a king. I know you're saying in the Arabic it's considered the same, and like you would know the difference, but then it's leaving it open for interpretation that someone that is not from that background and someone that then wants to come in and learn. If someone wants to come in and learn,
imagine your brothers come to you discuss it. What's the difference of understanding from this context that you got? God is the owner of the Day of Judgment or the king of the Day of Judgment. Now, you're disagreeing like they did earlier time in the Battle of Armenia. Muslim soldiers fighting, and then when they're reciting the Quran, they said, my reading is better than yours. Now, what I want to know from you, what differences of understanding do you get from the context?
Straight away, I would say an owner is underneath a king. I would say an owner is underneath a king.
So when God is the owner of the Day of Judgment, he's not the judge in that day?
No, if you're saying he's an owner, I'm saying other people can be given owners. But say, for example,
the Day of Judgment, right? Day of Judgment.
But I'm saying that when you're talking about owners, there could be many owners, but there'll only be one king.
Missing some point. Okay, when God is described the only owner of the Day of Judgment, no one else, the only king of the Day of Judgment, okay? If God is described that, there is no other king and there is no other owner. So, who's doing the judgment?
No, I understand what you're saying, where you're giving him the specific title as owner, but I'm saying other people will have that title too. Because if people own some cattle...
We're not talking about other people, we're not talking about other contexts.
No, but this is what I'm trying to say.
We're talking about within the context of the Quran, when these different readings are transmitted from the Prophet ﷺ.
Yeah.
Not a general usage of the word. We're talking about the Quran. So when you read the Quran, do you get a different meaning?
Saying that they both mean the same thing.
Yes.
You understand?
They complement each other.
And I'm saying to you, it does go both ways. Because you know what you're saying, they complement each other. He's only saying they complement each other because they go both ways.
Because they're accepted.
Yeah. But I'm saying it's just a linguistic nuance. Yeah. The ultimate meaning within the context is what you've understood, that here God is in control of the judgment. He will do the judgment. And that's why when the next ayah goes, the believers say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. That to you, it is you that we worship, and you that we seek for help.
I actually agree with you, yeah? Because we're just being silly for arguing about owners and kings. Yeah, I get it. I get
I'm the king of my house, I'm the owner of my house.
Yeah,
you get it?
I get the understand what you're trying to say. But then we leave it with basically saying, then don't say it's perfect. Because there's one part that's saying owner, another part that's saying king. But then in another term, you're saying that there's nothing that's changed. Nothing has changed, but it has. Because there's a meaning in one way that's saying owner, and there's a meaning in another way that's saying king. Now I know you're saying they both mean the same thing.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, this is a revelation that God sent.
Yes.
Of the one Quran, which he's describing himself as a king and as an owner.
Right, so when he sent it, did he send it say Maliki or did he send it say Maliki? Which one did he send?
I have just explained to you earlier on.
Yeah, I know.
He taught some companions one reading, another companion another reading. That means someone was taught Maliki, other was taught Maliki.
Maliki, but I accept that. But what I'm saying to you is he's been given it first.
It's not about first and second.
No, I'm saying Muhammad did God give it to everyone, or did God reveal it to Muhammad?
God revealed it to Prophet Muhammad.
Right, so when he revealed it to Prophet Muhammad, before Prophet Muhammad revealed it to anybody else, how did Prophet Muhammad interpret it?
Yeah. So what you're asking is this: which of this reading came first? Right.
Yes.
But what we're saying is this is not any significant to us. Why? Because all of this reading that Prophet taught at different times throughout his life until he left the whole of the Quran is what we are talking about. So the Quran that he's left, the final reading that he left, is the Quran that we are reading today. Okay? So if now we have Maliki and Maliki, we take both. We are not interested in which one was first, which one was second, because both of them are revelation for us to understand.
I mean, I can accept it, like I said, I can accept it. I've just always gone to the impression that there is no different, like Maliki and Maliki. You've taught me that, do you understand? I didn't know that. From what I've always, when I speak to Muslim brothers, they tell me that there is nothing in the Quran that is different. There's one Quran, there's not 2 or 3 or 4, there's only one Quran, only one interpretation of anything.
So, are you talking about translation?
Oh, translation, I might be using the word wrong. Okay, let's say in the Arabic format then. Yeah? Because that's how it's originally been given, yeah? Its original state is in Arabic format. So, again, when I
where is Hatun? She's supposed to come back, right?
Quran, that nothing is changed, nothing is altered, nothing is slightly different. If anything's slightly different, then the person in the back will say, oh, you just said that wrong. So if he says Maliki, but the person in the back says you should say Maliki.
So it's interesting when we go to prayer, say in a mosque in London, right, Regent's Park Mosque. An imam who recites in Warsh, Maliki, when he recites it, you're not going to find people saying wrong, right? Because they know this is an accepted reading, authentic reading from the Prophet, which is Quran. So if you went to Morocco, you'll probably hear this reading. But if you come here and he reads, some people, I agree, some people might think, but they will then these are the people who don't know the readings. Okay, there might be lots of people who don't know the readings. And this is why Muslims need to learn about their religion.
I mean, if I was a Muslim and he was speaking of the God that I believe in, and he was to use the owner prescription, I would correct him and say, no, it should be a king. I know you're accepting the version, but I would still correct him.
You would have corrected him with your lack of knowledge about the accepted modes. That's the basis, brother.
Yeah, but I mean, only on the basis
that's lack of knowledge. If a person, because there's scholars who pray behind scholars. No scholar will correct him if it's a different mode. He knows it's an acceptable mode. Because the modes don't change the meaning. That's the simple fact.
Anyway,
I understand it.
Anyway, and I understand your point. I mean, I've given you an example from historical past where the Muslim soldiers were reading each other and they were actually discussing this and arguing with each other, my reading is better than yours.
Exactly.
So this is what was trying to. So the mushafs that we have, they are transcribed, as I said. You can read both of these readings. So the examples that she had, I asked her, can she give me a copy of this so I can go through all the examples and give her a feedback. Okay? I have a few already from their lectures here. Okay? They only like to lecture themselves without having a proper discussion with someone who wants to talk about it. As you can see, was she really interested to talk about it? I don't know why, right? Because I was going to show you. So I have examples that they have done, and I can show you from the script. It's the same script, and you can read it all the different ways. Same script.
So can I ask you another question then? Where is the original script?
So when you say original, there are many earlier copies that has survived. Okay?
No, but I mean the original, because I remember from them times it was...
When Uthman compiled it, initially they were written in bones.
Yeah, because it was no paper.
In parchments, in stones, in date leaves, date stalks. Any form of writing material, written in. They will be written in as the Prophet have dictated to them.
As he speaks there.
But there was a compilation under one bound book at one point during the time of Caliph Abu Bakr, right?
That part, I understand that part.
We talked about the second compilation where we wanted to, the Caliph at that time, with the consensus of the Muslim, consensus of the Prophet's companion, who agreed collectively, this is what the Quran left behind by the Prophet. He said, okay, we are going to now unite the Muslims under this reading, right?
Yeah. I've heard the story.
So this, copies of this, very early copies of this exist, okay? When you say the very originals,
yeah, like the one that was written on the bone, for example.
yeah, some of them survive in museums. I mean, but maybe not be the originals, maybe much later on.
Yeah.
I know someone in a book called Short Introduction to the Quran by Michael Cook, he's one of the Orientalists. He gave us an example of a picture of how the Quran is transcribed in a bone and a picture of Surah Al-Fatiha. But how early it goes, I don't know, because I don't remember the exact dating of this. Okay?
But when you say some of them, is some of them missing?
So what happened was, when all of this was compiled, I mean, this needs a real detailed explanation, because otherwise, when I give you a whole jigsaw and some missings, you might not get the full picture, right? I'm only giving you parts of the picture.
Fair enough.
When it was all compiled, through all the compiled primary witnesses, 2 witnesses for each verse, each ayah, then all of these primary materials were not necessary anymore. Okay?
Got rid of them.
Yeah. So when it was standardized in this reading, it was all got rid of, destroyed.
So the original, it was recited, yeah, for him to
And transcribed.
And then from
retranscribed.
memorized, they've now written it down onto the bones.
No, not memorized. From the written material, it was retranscribed collectively with the consensus of the Muslim community.
So the original scripture that was written on the bones was then written on paper. Is that what you mean?
There are 2 versions of the history. Okay, one is the second compilation also happened where the Caliph made this edict: whoever has the Quran that was written down directly in the presence of the Prophet, come along and produce 2 witnesses that you've heard this. So they all brought down, and then it was all written down. But the one who was in the process of writing was ordered, whenever you disagree with the writing because of the dialect, write it down in the dialect of the Quraysh. Okay, not the dialect of other, for example. So there were people from Medina, the 3 scribes, and there were one from within the Qurayshi. So write it down within this particular dialect, if you want to call it. So it was transcribed. So the transcription happened from the original materials, and then it was checked with the companions when recited, and everyone agreed this is it. So once you now have a rewritten transcription from the original writers, authors, or the original scribes who wrote them, and retranscribed, it's still the original, because still this is original.
I get that, but forgive me if this is a difficult question, but like, it's been written on the bones because at that time there was no paper.
Yeah, say bones, different materials.
At some point the paper has come in now, yeah,
Much
for them to put it on.
Much later.
Is Muhammad still about them times there?
No, paper came much later. People transcribe
so Muhammad has gone now.
In parchments, in animal skin.
Yeah. So Muhammad has gone, and the Quran is still on the bones and skin at this present time.
No. Quran was compiled in every different materials they had.
Yeah.
Okay. They had all the materials,
and
in their hearts.
And then the Prophet passed away. And it was still on the original, was recited that people have remembered, and also that was written would be on the bones.
Writing material was still there.
Yeah, the writing material.
Everything that they had was
bones.
Not just bones, everything else.
Yeah,
right?
obviously bones, but everything else.
Yeah.
But then at some point now, it's transferred from the bones.
Would you like some water?
No, thank you. It's gone from the bones to the paper. Yeah. Now, how long ago was it that it went from the bones to the paper?
Okay, so we are talking about from the time of the Prophet to the first Caliph. First Caliph, his Caliphate was about 2 years or something, I can't remember exactly. Is it 2 years, Caliphate of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu? And then the second Caliph, the second compilation, is about 10-12 years. Okay, so we're talking about this period. Within this period, the companions of the Prophet who wrote them, they were alive. They were consulted, they came together, and they rewrote it and retranscribed it. So there is no risk of the Quran being lost in transcription or in translation, as they say, lost in translation, because now you have the original recipients who transcribed it are the ones who have produced it again to retranscribe it, and it was retranscribed and read it aloud to them so that they know this is it. from this master copy was made multiple copies, which was then disseminated within the Muslim provinces.
But wouldn't the original still be considered the original? I know you're saying that there's parts of it in museums.
When you say original, remember when these were written. Let me give you an example, right?
Because at one point, all of the bones and skin and everything that was written on, it would have come to one place, and then they would have written it again. Yeah. So at the time, it wasn't split about all over the place, was it? Like you see, like the Quran. Obviously, they knew it ritual, but they also would have written it down on the bones.
Look, this is one of the very, very earliest transcription of the Quran. It's most
on the bone or paper?
No, on parchment. No, people didn't just write on bone; they also wrote on parchments as well, right? Those who are able to write. So you can't just focus on bones because there are other materials.
No, yeah, sorry,
so,
I didn't mean like that.
So now this is something.
Is this in the time of the paper or non-paper?
Before the paper.
This is before the paper.
Before the paper, exactly. Before the paper. So now this is considered to be even the time before the compilation done to standardize the Quran in this particular way that Uthman did. So this is a Quran that was a parchment that was washed away and rewritten over it.
When you say washed away, what do you
because parchment was very expensive. You have to kill so many animals to produce this kind of leather to write on it.
Yes.
To make one mushaf, how many animals do you have to kill? 30, 50, 100, I don't know. You have to be very rich, right, to even buy this. So they would reuse it, okay, if necessary. So this one was reused. So what we now have technology with ultraviolet lightning or whatever they're using to go and read the undertext. And you can see the undertext here. They finish this one chapter and then he writes it. Because every surah, apart from one surah, starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay? So he writes Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and then crosses off and says La taqul Bismillah and then start the surah. Do not say Bismillah within the same text. So if this was left, as I mentioned earlier on, and people used and reused to transcribe it, there is a risk that people will consider this part of the Quran. So what Uthman radiallahu anhu did, when he compiled under a bound copy for dissemination to the whole of the Muslim provinces everywhere for public consumption, none of these will be present. No commentaries of your personal copies that you made, none of this will be present. Totally, the only thing will be the Quranic ayah and the Quranic surah, beginning to end. This would not be included. So this was not necessary. So that's why he issued saying once this is all done and all agreed upon, that now we have the Quran as the Prophet left behind, everything else should be destroyed.
That sounds a bit suspicious though.
Hang on. If it wasn't destroyed,
no, but do you understand what I mean though?
How is it suspicious? Tell me.
Well, because I mean,
suspicious.
If I've got the original copy, of this video, yeah, and I make a copy, there's no reason for me to deliberately destroy the original copy.
Take my example.
I've just got the copy, just in case I lose the original.
What you didn't include is this example. People were writing within the material that they have their own commentaries, because remember, these people are the first revelation of the Quran. They are witnessing revelation coming down to the Prophet, and they wanted to ask the Prophet, what does it mean? And they understood it, they would write it down. They're writing down even within the text itself, because they know that when they read the Quran, they're not going to make a mistake. But someone else, they don't know the intention of writing this.
A few years down the line.
It's possible for, like if I were to read it today, I would say this is part of the Quran, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. They knew. So if that was left behind, there is always this risk. People will consider this as part of the Quran. So what Uthman did, the same people who wrote this, the same people who got the transcribing process, collected it together, and they agreed. So it is not about like making a copy of a copy and something different, no. It is now making another original copy in agreement, in consensus of what the Quran is, and destroying these things which might confuse some people later on.
No, but
That's
I mean,
why.
wasn't the final word protected by God?
That's how it's been protected.
Yeah, so therefore you don't need to destroy the
No, no,
original.
no, 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 no. It's not about living. You see, God told us the way we have reliance on Him. One of the examples that the scholarship gave, for example, suppose now you've got your horse or your camel, right, whatever. You're there and you want to now have a nap underneath a tree. And you just bought this horse, right? Or this camel, so expensive. And you've gone there somewhere, right, in a desert or in the area. Now, if you go to a nap without tying your camel, and you find your camel, your horse gone, are you going to blame God or are you going to blame you? God, our Prophet, taught us that having reliance on God in such a way that make your own effort. Tie the camel or the horse, so when you have a nap, you have a peace of mind. When you wake up, it's still there because you've made the effort. So these efforts are there, even though if none of these were done, Allah will still protect it as He promised. But we have to make this effort because the responsibility also is there to know that there is a risk of some people falling into this confusion.
I mean, I'm not saying that this is what happened, but in most cases, if I have something that I don't want you to know about, and I have the evidence of it, and I want to teach you something different, then I would destroy the original evidence. I'm not saying it happened in your situation.
You see, again, you're conflating the issues. If the compilation was done, which was then made into mass copies and distributed by one man, one person, without consulting the initial recipients, the companions, then you have a suspicion saying, has he done it right? Has he done it correctly? He could have just changed something here and there. But this is not exactly what happened. What has happened is the same recipients who wrote the Quran consulted and approved. So if, for example, if there is a text, right, and we all agree that this is the text, so it doesn't matter how many times you rewrite it, if you every time you say, look, write it this way, recite it back this way, this is it, again, because you are the primary
But
witnesses.
That doesn't make sense because the companions wouldn't have been around when it got transferred from the animal skin to the paper.
When it was transcribed, as I said, from the second of the narrations, companions were called again. Okay, there's one lesser known narration, where they're all asked to submit your authentic primary first-hand material that you transcribed directly in the presence of the Prophet. So they came along and the witness came along, says, okay, this is what was transcribed, I testify. So you have the primary material again in the process. Imagine now this happened the second time and the third time, fourth time. What's happening? Every time you have the primary documents. The documents are primary, witnesses are primary. So the trust, the reliability, the authenticity, the authenticity, strength does not diminish at all. Because when we talk about the authenticity and reliability and strength of witnesses and documentation, this is of the highest standard. If it wasn't, it's not hope.
Well, we have to
no, it's not hope. We know for sure because this is how it was transmitted.
Sure, because the original evidence has been destroyed.
You're saying again. The original evidence were together and mass transmitted to the Muslims. And not only that, not only this. Look, if I destroy this and he records it, I can still resurrect this back from him, his camera.
But the point still remains: are you going to destroy the original? Unless there's something that you're going to alter, for example, and say like the altar is something disrespectful, just for argument's sake, then in order for me now to prove that didn't happen, I'd have to get my hands on the original. Now, what you're going to do is destroy the original, otherwise you've had it.
What you didn't appreciate, even if I've explained, when they came together to rewrite it under one mushaf, right? From some people had parts of it written, they didn't have all of it. Now, from those parts, or from the whole, it's transcribed again properly. This transcription is not such that you'll have any doubt or dispute. This is my point, because there is no room for doubt, dispute and error in that transcription, because all of them are coming with their primary witnesses and agreeing and testifying and approving. So nothing without doubt.
All of them, it would have been like a handful of men.
Look, if each verse is testified by 2 companions, because this is enough sufficient as a witness that this is the Quran. One person brings it, 2 witnesses. How many witnesses do you need for something? Million? Of course not. So if you have reliable witnesses, trustworthy witnesses, primary witnesses, and now you have this collection from there, we have absolute certainty from them. If it was otherwise, in which, as I said, someone else we don't know who transcribed it, we have no idea where he transcribed it from by himself, in his own room, and transcribed it, and then says, there you go, that's the Quran, copy it in mass numbers. Suspicion.
Is it not fair to say that even the person that has transcribed it, the one that you speak of, that he also, we have to know his background and how he is as a person.
Absolutely, and we do. We do. We have testimony of how honest, of a good memory, and so on about himself. And he was not the only one. There were other scribes also writing. And from them, they are made into other copies and distributed. And this distribution, remember, we're not talking about where it's distributed 500 years later, within the same time. And what we are forgetting in the discussion is the Quran is also preserved in the hearts. So they have this, and they're reciting. They're reciting audibly in their prayers, in their reading, in their gathering. So whatever has been transcribed, if there was a single error, it would have been picked up immediately. Just like today what happens. The Quran goes through meticulous checks, and if there's one error, it's picked up and it's rejected, right? So because of this, both graphic and oral, meaning written and recite in memory, went hand in hand, the chance of any error coming in is not the case. That's why the primary mode of the Quran is memory and memory, because that guarantees its preservation. Secondary is your writing form. But when you have both hand in hand, you cannot, in fact, Ramadan is coming at the end of this month. Yeah, we're going to fast. What you will witness is most of the countries, including London, in the mosques, the whole of the Quran from beginning to end will be recited this month. The whole Quran will be recited from memory, without looking at the Quran, from beginning to end in this month. Some finish at 27 days, some 30 days or 29 days, right? Yeah. So, I invite you to visit one of those mosques. One is Regent's Park. There's a Qatari mosque here there near Hilton or Sheraton in this park road. In Whitechapel Mosque, in Whitechapel, called the East London Mosque. And you will see when the Imam is reciting. We are human, right? Sometimes, even though you've been reciting this for hundreds of times, you might make a mistake. He makes some mistakes. People trying to correct him, but they're told, no, you don't correct him because it's going to disturb others. Because imagine everyone trying to correct him, because many people have memorized the Quran. He was left to say, okay, people in the front row, let them correct, okay? And you will see how they're correcting. Even as I said, a single letter, if it's pronounced differently, you will get corrected.
This is what we spoke about, though, isn't
yes,
it?
this is what we mean by preservation of the Quran and transmission.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I can accept it. I don't have any. It's only when we talk about like it not all being kept is where I have to. I know you're saying it didn't have to be kept.
I said, I gave you the reasons why it needed to be destroyed, because of the confusion for the future generations. This particular one, now we've discovered, right?
It's a bit scary.
No, this particular one, now, if there was no oral form of preservation of the Quran, and you got this, you'll say, that's a different Quran, it says something different. So the memory preserved it and said, no, that's not right. Every other mushaf which was standardized and copied tells you that's not right. That means this particular copy of an individual is his own commentary.
Unless the recitement was different on the skin. Unless the recitement was different on the skin, because it would have been recited onto the skin first.
No, when you say transcribed, once you say transcribed in the skin, you're keeping again talking about once that was destroyed. When one material was destroyed, another material of the same strength, quality and reliability was made. That's the key point.
I hear.
That's the key point.
Apart from the fact that there's no need to destroy them.
I give you a reason why it needed to be.
Because people are going to interpret it different ways.
Because this particular example I've shown you, right? If you were to see this is a page of the Quran, beginning of the surah, and it's just La taqul bismillah in it. It's not in the footnote. It's not in the margin. Why is it different? Is it a different Quran? You're going to have this question. So things like this exegetical gloss, we call it, or exegetical remarks, commentaries, we know they used to write it. We know that. And as I shown to you, first time in the history of Islam, as far as I know, first time in the history of Islam, or history of the world, we have now documentary evidence to show to the people that the companions would often write commentaries, their remarks within the text. We knew about this, but we couldn't provide you a documentary evidence. We knew in the hadith, we knew in our biography of the prophets and so on, and how some companions to read and they used to write. We knew this is transmission, but there wasn't anything that I can show you physically. When I say evidence, this is what evidence is. But previously, this is our teaching, this is our belief, this is our tradition. Our tradition. Yeah, our tradition. But now, our tradition is what? Demonstrated to be accurate with documentary evidence for the first time in the history within 1400 years. Beautiful. First time. Even though we know, this is, we don't know who wrote it, and it's called La taqul bismillah anyway, but at least we can appreciate what our scholars talked about because we can clearly see it. So when we talk about the ahruf, what was destroyed, maybe some of the ahruf people wrote it, who knows in what form they wrote their commentaries. So when the Quran was standardized with the consensus of the Muslim, the companions of the Prophet, we know that this is the Quran the Prophet left behind. So when you read it, that's the Quran that you read. We have certainty. So that's why Muslims are certain about the Quran that is being transmitted to us.
You know what, I've really got to go to. I've enjoyed it though.
Take care.
I've enjoyed it.
Take care, man. Come again. 100%,
yeah? Paul. Yeah?
Nice talking to you.
Come
You
again,
take
man,
care.
yeah? Take care, bro. Take care. Excellent, brother Mansoor. Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar.
These things need to be repeated.
معنا نهج حياة جئنا تبصرة عن كل ضلال أعددنا بضع رسالات تحمل نورا للأجيال.